Hello everybody and welcome back to another Kings of War Battle Report. I'm Visibly Riley, and this week we have Nightstalkers versus the Forces of Nature. This battle was fought at 2300 points and the scenario was Push. So first off, we have my opponent's Forces of Nature list, which opens with a horde of air elementals with the Hammer of Measured Force, a horde of earth elementals with the Aegis of the Elohi, a horde of fire elementals with the Brew of Haste, a horde of water elementals with the Wine of Elvenkind, and I'm sure somewhere Captain Planet is proud. Then we have a regiment of 4 Shamblers, a Tree Herder, a Greater Earth Elemental, a Beast of Nature with 7 attacks and wings as upgrades. Then we have a Forest Warden with a Loot of Insatiable Darkness, a Pegasus, a Unicorn with the Conjurer's Staff, Wings, and Lightning Bolt 5 upgrades, and finally a Gladewalker Druid with Blizzard 2 and Surge 8. My thoughts on this list are as follows. It's a unit strength 12 or unit strength 20, unit count 12 list, which is pretty elite. 2300 points with only 12 drops is, I think, asking for a bit of trouble, but still, it is a really good list in my opinion, or at least it's what I look at, or it's what I imagine when I look at Forces of Nature. For example, in version 2, when I was giving demos of this game and sort of getting people into it and talking about the armies and what they were capable of, the number of people I knew that built Forces of Nature armies that were a 1-1-1-1 elemental horde list, right? They're like, oh, I just want to have them all, right? It would be a really cool theme, and people are really into it, and it just didn't work in version 2. Well, in version 3, I think it works pretty well. They all complement each other pretty well. Like the fire elementals are obviously the offensive ones. The water elementals are sort of a switch hitter, right? They can do whatever you need them to do, and I think the Wine of Elvenkind is kind of ubiquitous on them for a reason, right? Like, it's just so good to have a speed 7 nimble shambling unit. And speaking of that, we have the Air Elemental Horde, which I think is an addition to a lot of lists that people skip. It is a speed 10, melee 3 plus nimble shambling unit with 18 attacks, right? It doesn't have any crushing, but with a hammer it doesn't matter. And if anything, it's probably the best unit in the game to put the Hammer of Measured Force on, because unlike other units like an Elven Spear Horde or anything like that, sometimes has the hammer, it can't be chapped up by a unit that is defense 3 or anything like that. This sort of a unit chooses its target, right? It's very difficult if the air elementals don't want to fight you to force them to fight you. So yeah, it's just an excellent use of that item and a really interesting unit. And I think that that's what this army as a whole really exemplifies, is that it might not be the most mechanically strong army, but it is a combo force, and I think it looks like a blast to play. So anyway, those are my thoughts, and I wouldn't change anything in it. I think this is pretty perfect. So let's move into my Nightstalkers army. So my Nightstalkers army is 4 regiments of Reapers, a Scarecrow regiment, 4 regiments of Butchers, a Void Lurker with the Pipes of Terror, 2 Mind Screeches, a Shade with the Boots of the 7 Leagues, and a Horror with the Inspiring Talisman or a Vicious Melee Infantry only and Banechant 2 upgrades. This is a 14 unit count, 25 unit strength army, and it's alright. I built this list after I played my elf version of just Palace Guard, where I just brought tons of Palace Guard. It worked really well, and I was like, well, if I'm running Palace Guard, why don't I just try it with the Reapers? So this is a really skew army. I wrote it. It's definitely a first draft, and I had it packed. And unfortunately, we're having the floors redone at my place, so I only have access to limited models right now. So I already had the army packed, so it was gonna come out and do a debut. And I was like, it might not be the best, but I do kind of like the idea, right? Every once in a while, it's fun to play a skew, and it gives you a good understanding of how far you can push the Reaper idea. I don't like Reaper troops. I don't know if I've talked about that on the channel before, but I think they're far, far too fragile. The nerve is way too low for that defense 4 unit, and Reaper regiments I already think are pushing it. And honestly, I mean, this list is probably better off with, like, just playing it as Soul Reavers or Soul Drinkers or whatever the hell the vampires on foot are called. It's a minuscule amount of points to upgrade them for what they get, because they get that Life Leech 2, they get +1/+1 nerve, and then they get +1 crushing. They lose Stealthy and Mind Thirst, but So yeah, it's more just a fun list for me to try out, or a fun concept for me to try out. And yeah, that's about it. I do like the hero package, the hero and monster package, I think is really good. Void Lurkers are excellent dragons. If you haven't tried them out, you should. They do all the things that dragons do except for fight just as well as a dragon. And they fight really well, right? But they do the interdiction game really well. Double Mind Screech, I really like. I don't like triple. Quad Mind Screech, I think, is a complete waste of points. But 2 Mind Screeches, great, amazing. The Shade with the Boots of the Seven Leagues, I like these hero types. I like the Flying Scout hero. This one's not a duelist, so it's not exactly my favorite, but still, it's good, and it can get dread wherever you want. And finally, the Horror with the Aura Vicious is just, you have to have it in your Reaper list. It's just too important. So anyway, with that out of the way, let's get into the game. So we're starting here with the scenario, which is push. Push is a relatively simple one on the surface. You roll a d3, and each player gets that many loot tokens at the beginning of the game. After deployment, you roll off to see who places the first one first, and you each take turns placing them in your deployment zone or on your unit, so you can do either. And then there's one loot counter in the center of the field. At the end of the game, you get 2 victory points for each loot counter you control wholly on your opponent's side of the field, so the unit has to be entirely on their half, and 1 point if they're anywhere else. Loot counters, of course, for a refresher, you can only be speed 5, or you're only speed 5, you lose flight, you lose nimble, you cannot be targeted by surge or wind blast. So yeah, push it's not exactly my favorite scenario, and I think it's a good example of something that doesn't work because it scores at the end of the game. It's just way too important to get first turn, in my opinion. But anyway, with that out of the way, let's talk about the terrain. So first off, yeah, we have 2 height 9 forests, but I'd like to talk about the table layout real quickly, which is my opponent couldn't get their daughter down asleep quickly enough for us to start at a reasonable hour. We didn't even get the terrain out until 10:30 at night, so on a Tuesday. So it was a bit late. But anyway, so we were setting out the terrain, and specifically, like, I set up this side, and it's really problematic. And I should have spent more time looking at it, because while this side has this large open spot in the middle to set up a line, right? A battle line. Then it has this one for, like a second battle group, and then this one for a smaller battle group, right? And only a little bit of terrain that it can plop units in if it wants to have a bit of range defense, or to avoid, right, if it doesn't have the melee. While on this side of the table, right, there's this hill, and then this impassable that are creating natural lanes for us to travel through, right? The hills you can travel over, but they block line of sight, or they occlude it. But the deployment down here, we have a giant forest and a giant piece of difficult terrain that I have to deploy in, or whomever is on this side of the table has to deploy in, and that is a problem. I think in the future, where I had to look at this table again and not change too much about it, right? Keep it as close as possible. I would swap this forest for that forest because this one is smaller, and then I would also push probably this back a little bit, just because right now there's one deployment area and it's behind a hill, and then there's this deployment area and it's behind impassable, so it's just a bit of a problem. But anyway, I did this to myself, and we're gonna have to go on forward. So speaking of the rest of the terrain, we have 2 height 1 pieces of difficult terrain. We have 2 height 3 hills. We have 2 height 2 obstacles. These are the gravestones we generally use to just demark that this is difficult terrain, just to add a bit of flavor. But we forgot to bring down the walls this week, so they're going to be walls. So those are obstacles. Then, of course, we have 2 height 7 impassables. And again, on this side of the field, we have a fucking impassable, or an impassable piece in the deployment zone as well. So, yikes. Just not the best setup. Granted, again, I didn't set up this entire side of the field. I just, pushed things around a little bit. But I should have paid more attention if I was helping set up. So anyway, with that, let's go into deployment. So first off, we have the Beast of Nature with the wings and attack 7. Then we have the Air Elemental Horde with the Hammer of Measured Force. Behind here, we have a Gladewalker Druid with Blizzard 2 and Surge 8. It's always hard to pick him out there. To the right of that, we have the Fire Elemental Horde and the Forest Shambler Regiment in front of them. To the right of that, we have the Earth Elemental Horde. Then to the right of that, actually, let's talk about this real quick, because it's almost impossible to see it. In fact, I didn't even mark. That is my opponent's Pegasus behind the Greater Earth Elemental here. And if we look at this picture, yeah, you're not going to see it at all. So anyway, that's where it is. Then we have the Greater Earth Elemental. To the right of that, we have the Unicorn with Flight, Lightning Bolt 5, and Conjure Staff. In front of it, we have the Tree Herder, who is already what is this? Scouted forward. So, this is after scout. Then we have the Force Warden, who is also scouted with lead loot of Insatiable Darkness. Then off here to the right, all in their lonesome, is the Water Elemental Horde with the Wind of Elvenkind. They don't need too much support because, again, I don't have that much shooting, and they are in cover, so any shooting I get is going to be -1, since I don't have any war engines. So anyway, facing off against the Water Elemental Horde, because they're so important to kill, I put 1 regiment of Scarecrows. And that's it. Again, just the way the terrain was really forced me into certain deployment methods. But yeah, I just put down 1 Scarecrow regiment just to be annoying. Then off to the right of that, we have the first 2 Reaper regiments, followed by the first 2 Butcher regiments in front of them. And then finally, the Mind Screech over here, Blue Leader returns. Then to the right of that, actually behind Blue Leader, first we have the Horror with the Vicious Aura, the Banechant Toot, and the Inspiring Talisman. Then we have the 3rd Reaper Regiment, the 4th Reaper Regiment, and the 3rd Butcher Regiment in front of that 4th Reaper Regiment. Then we have the 4th Butcher Regiment in front of my Void Lurker with the Pipes of Terror. We have Red Leader, the Mind Screech on top of this hill, and over here in front of it, we have a Shade with the Boots of 7 Leagues. This is after scout moves, and I'll talk about the Shade in a second here specifically. So here is the end of deployment picture and after scout moves, so it's what it all looks like. Speaking of the Shade, so I messed up with the Shade already. This is the first mistake of the game, which is while I was deploying my units out, I finished deploying I finished deploying last because my opponent has fewer drops than me and began the drop because obviously they won the roll off for table side and chose the side that is good. This side kind of sucks. So yeah, they chose that side, and then I forgot to put my Shade out, so when we were doing the scouts, my opponent was like, okay, I'm going to scout my units, and I was like, oh, I have a scout, though, and I was trying to find it, and I just had it, like, sort of sitting over here, because I put all my models outside of 12 to show that they're not deployed yet, and then I was like, oh, I'll just scoot it back to within 12 and then scout move, right? And I did get tricked a little bit because I was like, it'll be a fine deployment because I want to hunt down the Druid back there, right? Like the Shade versus the Druid is pretty good. But because of these air elementals, they're speed 10, nimble, and more importantly, they're shamble, right? So they're just going to walk right through my Shade if I put it over there. So in retrospect, I should have put the Shade over here to help out in these combats, right? So maybe hunt down, some of my opponent's smaller units like the Unicorn, the Pegasus, the Force Warden, or maybe mess around with the Water Elementals if I want to. So yeah, this is a bit of a mistake. But anyway, moving forward into turn 1. So turn 1 also goes to the Force of Nature. So this is, again, I think a lot of people have a problem with push as a scenario because this is how it works, right? Not only do I have the worst side of the table, right? So my opponent won the roll-off for that. And I'm not against asymmetrical terrain deployment, right? Like, I think this sort of a thing is a fine thing to do in a tournament. When you're setting up tables, it's just a question of, when do you want to do it? And I set up the table, or I helped set up the table, so I should have been more cognizant. But anyway, my opponent won the roll-off for table side, chose the table side that was better, and then won the roll-off for going first, and it's so huge. It's probably the biggest thing in Kings of War right now, in my opinion. Moving past the fearless argument, but going first is an almost always thing that you will want to do, right? There are certain armies and in certain scenarios where you're going like, I don't care if I go second, but you probably still want to go first. And push is one of those scenarios where there's no question about it. You want to go first, period, end of story, because you get double VP for being entirely on your opponent's side of the field. So pushing to the center line not only helps set up a threat vector, right? So you're getting all this interdiction. You are also winning on the scenario already, right? So I think honestly a great change to push, number 1 would be it should have dynamic scoring at the end of every turn, and it should start with the second player's turn, right? So second player's second turn, second player's third turn. It doesn't really matter when you start scoring, second player's first turn, whatever. Because going second in push is sometimes disastrous. Sometimes it's just like the game is over. Not in this game. This is fine. But in general, I don't like this because it just makes it so first person wins or gives them a huge, huge advantage, right? So anyway, enough of a tirade on that. So my opponent just pushes their stuff forward. It's about what you'd expect. The Earth Elementals and Fire Elementals are supporting each other. The Shamblers move specifically to block line of sight to this Shade. The Shade cannot see them, I don't think. And then because they didn't want to get double charged by a Shade and by the Void Lurker, because on average it's like a 7 to kill. So I could pop them turn 1 and then be, you know, in my opponent's line. But I'm not sure I would do that anyway, right? Like with the air elementals and the beast back here and the ability to just turn and surge, right? My opponent has what, surge 22 in this list, or no, surge 20 in this list, right? And specifically from 3 different, or it's split up amongst 3 casters. So I just don't want to be there, but they do it anyway. So they're hiding a bit. And then the shade, I was hoping would, you know, my opponent would make a bit of a mistake and hold back all these units just to make sure that I don't charge and ground them. They do it with the air elementals, but I think that's just sort of what air elementals do in the first place. And the beast just gets in the way. Now, they are hiding from the Void Lurker, so again, another mistake with the shade being on this side is that the Void Lurker is already locking those flyers down a bit, because my opponent is really reticent to move forward and engage on the Void Lurker's terms. So yeah, again, the shade's not doing too much just yet. You will see, this is how I think air elementals should be played. Same thing with like Draken Hordes, which is they're a sweeping unit, right? You keep them back and you wait till later turns in the game. Honestly, turn 3 at the earliest, I think. And in later turns, then they come in and kill off wounded units, or they get good flank charges or something like that. Unless your opponent gives you something really juicy, right? Like if I charge with my Void Lurker, sure, take it. But otherwise, yeah, just hang back, sit over here and wait for things to happen. And then finally, we have the water elementals. Yeah, they just move forward a little bit. They get out of cover because they got first turn, and they're setting up to threaten this hill, which is a good idea. They can't see over it just yet. I think I probably would have moved them in such a way that they can get their leader point within 7 inches of the hill, so they can just walk onto it, see things, and threaten that way. But my opponent holds them back a little bit, which I think is fine. And then in shooting, not a whole lot happens. My opponent takes the druid, shoots at my shade with Blizzard 2, misses with both shots. Then the lightning bolt hits the scarecrows off screen a little bit with 1 and actually hit with 3, I think, but only wounded once. It was a really bad roll. And yeah, it puts 1 wound on the scarecrows, which they don't care about. So that's going to be it for shooting, and we'll move into turn 1 for the Nightstalkers. So turn 1, Nightstalkers. I push forward with my lines, hiding behind the butchers. This is the only butcher regiment that pushes its full movement, and that is because, again, my opponent got first turn, so they can push the center a little hard, and I can't do too much about it in this sort of a list because of this giant forest, so I can't project enough threat. So I push the butchers forward and just go, yeah, charge them, kill them, I don't really care. And then I keep this Reaper regiment out of the charge range. This pink die is marking the farthest charge that my opponent has. So yeah, they're not able to charge any of this stuff unless they really want to go for a surge 20 to get a long ball charge on maybe the fire elementals. But anyway, they're out of charge range otherwise. And then these guys move forward. They are dodging the line of sight of the tree herder, and then they're out of the charge range of this. The unicorn, yes, the unicorn can charge me, but you know, it's speed 20 or it's speed 10 and then height 4, so it can pretty much charge whatever it wants anyway. The hill doesn't do anything to it, so I can't get out of it. And I like this movement a bit. The Reapers are not in the terrain. I put one of the Butcher regiments in the terrain because it doesn't really matter. I don't care if they're hindered. And then on top of it, if my opponent pushes aggressively again on turn 2, I can use this Butcher regiment to block the edge of that terrain. So when the Reapers charge, they cannot enter it, so I will not be hindered, right? So that's the plan there. And then finally, the Scarecrows here just move forward. They are helping protect my flank here. And this is an important thing about Scarecrows or zombies or any of these types of units, which is it doesn't matter if they can do damage. Just the fact that they can get in the way of a unit like Water Elementals and hold them for a turn, that's at most a 6th of the game, at least a 7th of the game, right? Where this unit is now useless. So it's just a good idea. They really help hold a flank, and they can do it. I view them as like an ablative piece of armor, right? Like they are going to die, they're going to get out of here, but they can give you 1 turn of safety, right? So anyway, they move forward to help protect there. And off here, finally on the left, I move forward with my line to force the Void Lurker to give even more lines of threat. Because I'm behind the Butchers, there's no way to land and charge it right now, because I'm within 20 of both these units. So that's the plan. And finally, I moved the shade, as you can see. I ran it over here. My plan is I'm out of charge arc of the air elementals and the beast. And then if the air elementals want to charge me, I think I'm just out of 6, or I'm either just within 16 or just out of 16. Either way, it's a 5 or a 6 surge that they'll need to actually get that charge. So I'm perfectly fine with that. From the leader point, by the way, right? Because they do have to turn to come at me, so they lose a little distance. But anyway, that is the plan to force that surge and see if my opponent can roll it. If they can't, even if they hit it, it's not terrible, right? But forcing your opponent to take risky decisions is always good. And here we go with the shooting. So red leader fires off a lightning bolt into this druid, does 1 wound, and of course boxcars it because screw you, druid. And finally, we have, I forgot to take a picture of this, but blue leader, being the best of my mind screeches, fires into these fire elementals with a wind blast and pushes them back 5 inches. I love wind blast for this, especially when my opponent is playing an elite build. Wind blast can really disrupt the line, right? So now these fire elementals are not particularly helpful, right? So it might change what these, what they're capable of and what's really threatening my butchers. So anyway, that's that, and we go into turn 2. So turn 2 for the Forces of Nature. You can see here we only have we have 2 charges going on. We have the 4 Shamblers go into my Butcher Regiment, and then the Greater Earth Elemental shifts a little bit to give line of sight to the Pegasus onto my Reapers. I'm perfectly fine with this. My opponent really only has 1 of these ablative units, right? Their list is a 12 drop list, and everything is really important. Everything is a hammer or an anvil or both, right? So they only have this 1 unit that can really do something like this, and without being a big loss. And throwing it out turn 2 into a Reaper regiment that it's not really going to do anything to is great for me, especially because my opponent didn't move forward with this line, so my Reapers are not within charge range. These guys are, but my opponent stayed in range of just the Butchers and not the Reapers back here, so I'm not going to just send Reapers, hindered into Earth Elementals or into, any of this Def 6 stuff, right? Because I pushed the Fire Elementals back. So yeah, give me a unit. I'll take 2 damage to kill a Pegasus on turn 2. Give me it. Famous last words, right? So anyway, the Shamblers do 2 damage to my Butchers, which is not even a roll. And here we go at the end of the turn. I will talk a little bit about... it looks like my opponent just stayed over here. I think they moved themselves again out of 20 inches of the Void Lurker just to dodge any charges. I'm fine with that. My Void Lurker would not charge a Beast of Nature on its own. Granted, I do have a Shade that I can do something with. But the Beast of Nature backs up a little bit to block line of sight from my Shade to my opponent's Druid. Then the Druid walks out of the woods to hide behind it from the Mind Screech, and the Air Elementals just stay out of range. So that's what's going on there. And then the Water Elementals, they have a bit of a decision to make here, which is they were trying to stay out of 11 of my Scarecrows to stay something a bit more central, right? Like what I was talking about with this hill. But they decide in the end that they can't make it work, so they instead just get out of my line of sight. Personally, I would have, again, just moved them over here and let the Scarecrows flank charge you. Because just stay out of the Reaper range, right? Because if these guys flank charge you, who cares? They're not blocking your path to glory, right? They can't get in the way. They have 15 attacks on 5s and 5s, so they'd have 30 attacks on 5s and 5s. Who cares? So I, again, probably would have been a bit more aggressive with this unit, but I'm very happy that my opponent is not being aggressive. That means the Scarecrows are doing their job and holding them back. Even when they're not in combat, just the fact that I have this unit that can get in the way, it's forcing... Whoa, that was a terrible arrow. It's forcing my opponent to make some decisions that are questionable. So anyway, moving into Nightstalkers turn 2. So first off, I guess this is an out of order picture, but yeah, the Pegasus does 2 wounds to my Reapers and does not get a lucky waiver. So I'm cool with this. And here we go with Nightstalkers turn 2. So we've got a few charges going on. Yeah, of course the Reapers countercharge this Pegasus, looking for a free kill. I countercharge with these Butchers, and then I flank charge with these guns. So that's 27 attacks on 4s and 3s. It's probably bye-bye birdie to these 4 Shamblers. Which is great because I kind of need them to be gone because, again, with this terrain setup, that's impassable, and then I've got this giant forest, so I need to be able to get through this gap. And with the 4 Shamblers there, I obviously can't. So, yeah, but that's a really easy roll. to get, so it's fine, especially because, again, the Shade decides discretion is the better part of Valor. It doesn't have any charges except for the Beast of Nature, and that's a flank charge. So again, in the same way that I was talking about the water elementals, just maybe it would have been better to just accept the flank charge from these Scarecrows. Well, the Beast of Nature does exactly that and goes, well, even if you ground me, I can still charge 20, so who cares? And it doesn't have any TC, so... yeah, I just decide I'm just going to take the Shade and run off. The Shade is hidden from line of sight from the big Birdo and cannot be charged by these guys even with a Shamble because I am flush with this piece of terrain. So anyway, and then I'm giving my Dread to this combat because, again, I really need these gone. So I'm going to throw, almost everything I can. I could have got a Void Lurker in there, but I'm wondering why I didn't send the Void Lurker into this. I probably should have gone for a double here. Yeah, because I could have gone for the flank here first since these guys were perfectly aligned already. Gone for the flank charge and then sent the Void Lurker in there as well. But anyway, that's a mistake. Hopefully it doesn't mess me up. And off here on the right, you can see I move forward with the Reapers, and then I charge with these two Butchers. This Butcher Regiment goes into Tree Herder. That's necessary. It's hindered, but I don't care. It's blocking up these Fire Elementals and the Tree Herder even more because of that earlier Wind Blast. And then I decide to block in, with these Earth Elementals with these Butchers because I can slide down in front of them and then, they cannot fit between the gap of the two Butchers, right? So I charge into that Greater Earth Elemental. I'm not sure about that charge. It seemed good at the time, but in retrospect, I think I probably should have just kept this Butcher Regiment back and accepted that these guys can move forward because they're not the most damaging of units, and neither of them can hold up against a double Butcher charge. So, and if they want, or not double Butcher, double Reaper charge. So if they want to charge into the Butchers, that's fine. I think I should have allowed it. And then I could have hidden with these a bit better because you can see with this pink die, that's 14 inches from the water elementals, so they cannot charge into these Reapers, and then they're also at a 14 of these Reapers. But now I'm in a line, right? I'm having the same problem as these fire elementals, but I caused it, right? So if I just kept these Reapers back, I could have protected my flank with them, and then maybe allowed one of these, like the Greater maybe, to charge me because it's speed 6, I believe. So yeah, I could have just been like, the Greater can charge into a regiment of Reapers, and then I'll counter with both, right? So anyway, maybe a small mistake there, but it looks fine at the time. And here we go with shooting. Oh, I forgot to mention, I have all 3 loot tokens on Blue Leader because Blue Leader is best leader, and my opponent has put them onto the Earth Elemental Horde. So yeah, the Mind Screech, it's not quite as good as Planar Apparition. Obviously, Planar Apparitions are amazing as loot holders, but this is pretty good still because it's a backline unit, and I don't have a lot of units that I'm going to put loot tokens on in this list, right? I have 4 Butchers and 4 Reapers, and none of them want to have loot, so Mind Screech is fine for now. And over here, yeah, that Blue Leader nails a Wind Blast again, gets 4 inches onto the Fire Elemental, so that's minus 9 inches in their total speed so far. They've only gone 14, right? Because they have the Brew Haze, so they're speed 7. So they've effectively only gone 5 inches this turn. I'm okay with that. And over here, the Red Leader fires off a Lightning Bolt into the Beast of Nature, just looking for a lucky roll again. Gets 2 damage, but no boxcar to follow. And here we go at the end, or just showing off this charge. And here's the end of combat. This is horrific. So this is like, it's 27 attacks on 4s and 3s. It's like 8-ish wounds, let's call it. And even if we will roll a little low, which we did, we rolled a 7, I still have Dread, right? So it's a 6 twice to kill it. I roll, like a 7 or something on the first roll. The Tree Herd is obviously in range to inspire. And of course I roll a 5. So, or no, a 6? Was it a 7 to kill them? No, it's a 6 because of Dread. Right, yeah, exactly. I just did it. So yeah, I roll a 5. They're fine, and I am screwed. This is really bad. I really should have sent that Void Lurker in. I thought it might be, maybe I thought it was overcommitting at the time, but I really need to get through this gap. So anyway, I at least undercommitted then. And over here, yeah, these Butchers are like, screw it. We have 9 attacks on 5s and 4s. Let's do 4 wounds to this Tree Herder. So I'm like, it doesn't even matter though, right? It's going to Radiance, and then there's that Unicorn back there with heal 5 and the Conjurer Staff. So these wounds are going to be gone. But still, good effort, guys. There is no roll because dash 18. And over here, we have the Greater Earth Elemental. Yeah, I do 1 wound to it. I don't even know if we mark it because it doesn't matter. My opponent can just heal it with the Radiance of Life. So anyway, moving forward to the end of turn shot, I killed nothing this turn, but I only had, well, I had 2 chump charges over here. Oh no, I did kill something. I killed that Pegasus. Yeah, these guys wreck that Pegasus. I get a Bane Chant on them. They're vicious. They're not hindered because it's a counter charge. They just walk right through it, and I'm super cool with that. I originally was like, yeah, I'll just overrun, but then I was checking again with the air elementals. If I roll, if I roll like a 1 or a 2, I'm perfectly out of their charge right now. If I roll a 1 or a 2, I will be in their charge and they'll have a landing space. So I have to roll a 3+ to get out of it. And I'm just like, yeah, that's not worth it because I'm already within 12 of all these units anyway. So who cares? I'm just going to stay out of range, stay right here. Keep it secret, keep it safe. And moving forward to turn 3. So turn 3, things are getting real. So we have the Force of Nature. First off, we have, because I failed this charge so hard, the Beast of Nature has a rear charge onto these butchers, which is pretty bad. Again, if I'd killed it, I would have just reformed a face. That was the plan. Didn't work. So anyway, it charges into the rear. It is difficult for my opponent. It's a difficult decision because they're originally like, well, should I take it? Because obviously I'll just Void Lurker or Reaper Charge or something. I'll obliterate this Beast of Nature. But I think it is. And in the end, my opponent agreed with me, which is, yeah, you're going to kill this Butcher Regiment, but you're not just trading for that. Again, you're trading for 1 turn of my units right now, and the next turn Nightstalkers turn 3 is going to be huge, right? It's super important that I get my damage out there because I am just a face punch army, right? So blocking another one of my Reapers or blocking the Void Lurker, I think is going to be a big thing. And then they do a bit of a weird trick with the Earth Elementals, or the Air Elementals, which is they turn behind this rock to face the rock. So they can't see anything, but they did it specifically so the Void Lurker, if it wants to charge them, it cannot fit on the left of the unit. It has to fit on the right of the unit. So if it was on the left of the unit, I would definitely take that charge. It's pretty beautiful. You just charge in, land, and you're completely hidden from line of sight, and I'll probably win that war with Earth Elementals, especially because if it wants to be inspired, I'm inspired. So yeah, I'm pretty cool with that. So instead they do this, and I'm like, it's looking a little iffy now. I'm not sure if I even want that charge. And then of course they're hidden from my shade because I hid my shade from them. And otherwise, my opponent takes the charges you would expect. The fire and the tree herder go into these butchers. Yeah, and then these guys get a flank charge onto the butchers, which again, I'm not sure I care about, but it's all these little things that are adding up to this not being a great charge. So anyway, they'll probably be dead, but that's what butchers do. And finally, we have some shooting. So this unit, I've actually moved it back after the picture because, as you might guess it, my opponent is going to go for the 1-inch surge to get a flank charge onto the scarecrows and kill them off. And I was looking at this and I'm like, I don't really get it because they already had a front charge on me. And right, so they're going to go for this surge 4, right? So that's like a 93% chance of success, but still it's not 100, right? And if they miss, it's disaster for these water elementals because I will chap them for 2 turns then, right? 1 turn where they failed the surge, 1 turn where they have to kill me. But even worse, I think that my opponent could have just charged into the front to be in better position anyway. I already have 5 wounds on me, and that's 18 attacks on 4s and 2s, right? So I think that probably I would have just taken this front charge, tried to kill them off, and had better position, especially as the Reapers are not facing. So even if they fail, I don't have any counter charge, except for maybe a Mind Screech, but who cares? So yeah, I'm not exactly sure why they even risked it, but they did, and it worked. So they get the flank charge. Meh. And here we go in combat. Yeah, these guys attack and kill off those scarecrows pretty easily. And I just did that whole spiel about how they should have done the front charge, and my opponent rolls it in rolls their dice in batches, so 18 and 18, right? So the first batch only does 1 wound to the scarecrows, and I'm like, well, obviously they needed to flank charge. You just, you're prescient. You saw it in the cards. They kill them off. They only get a 1-inch overrun though, so they're still out of the game for a turn. The scarecrows doing God's work there. And over here, yeah, these guys, the fire elementals roll terribly and only do like 3 wounds, I think, to the butchers. They do terribly. But then the tree herder walks in, hits them with 9 attacks, wounds with 9 attacks, and just, they're dead. And over here, I don't know what you're expecting, but yeah, they die. So they're gone. Over here, the rear charge, my opponent, on average, that's like, 9 or 10 wounds, right? But instead, they do like 13 wounds, and of course, they kill them off. The only butchers left are the ones fighting the Force Shamblers. They take another 2 wounds, so they're at 4, but, they're dash 15, so they don't really care. And they stare down. Here is the end of turn shot. You'll see some interesting stuff, which I'll talk about. First, on the left, we have this Beast of Nature. My opponent spends a lot of time fiddling with this, and it's one of those questions of like, when do you play with a clock and when don't you play with a clock when you're talking about friendly games, right? I would say that you should probably split your time between them. Not playing with a clock allows you to build the muscle memory to know when these things are going to work, right? And see them and work through in practical space how things are going to work. But playing on a clock shows you what things are actually going to look like in a tournament, right? We spend seriously like 15 minutes talking about this Beast of Nature, and you would never do that in a tournament game. It would be a huge waste of your clock. I mean, I would love to do it as your opponent, but you probably wouldn't want to. So anyway, what we argue about is whether these Reapers can charge this Beast of Nature, which currently they can, but the way they do that is this unit of Butchers is more than 1 inch away from the Reapers right there. So they can withdraw and then slide 3 inches to the right, which allows these Reapers to charge, right? And because it's more than 1, it'll give them a little bit of wiggle room, because what my opponent's trying to do is make it so the Reapers are in the flank and then they can't hit the corner. But there's just no way to do that without giving the Void Lurker your flank. So in the end, we, come to the conclusion, no, it's not possible, and we place them like so. So yeah, it's a lot of time spent on that, but that's fine. It's just a question of when do you want to do it. Now, when the Fire Elementals kill off, or when the Fire Elementals and the Tree Herder kill off that unit of Butchers, I think my opponent makes a mistake here, and I think they would agree if they were in this battle report, which is they overrun with the Fire Elementals. That's not a mistake. But then they turn the Tree Herder, right? They didn't want the Void Lurker to get into the back line for, quote, free. But again, my opponent has so much Surge. It's not for free, right? They can just surge the Fire Elementals or the whatever Elementals into me. So it's just one of those things where if you're not used to playing with Surge, it's hard to remember that Surge itself, or not Shamble. Shamble's always a negative rule. No matter what anyone on the internet says, it's just negative. But Surge, on the other hand, makes it's the best flying defense in the game, right? So if you're looking for 1-inch surges, which is what this stuff would be, yeah, it's amazing. So they turn the Tree Herder to protect the air elementals, but when they did that, they made it impossible for the earth elementals here, after they kill off the Butcher Regiment, to actually turn to face my Reapers. So now I have a flank charge from Reapers. So yeah, these Butchers are looking great. I did a great job there. It's a solid move, right? Obviously. So anyway, my opponent's facing down some flank charges, but they've got these water elementals coming in, so maybe things will be fine. So moving into turn 3 for the Nightstalkers, we have a lot of charges going on. So let's start on the left. First off, yeah, these Reapers do end up charging into the Beast of Nature. I have to move my Void Lurker first, so I move the Void Lurker over here. I think about charging over here, but it's not really worth it. I can't see anything except for the Fire Elementals, and I can't fit. The space between this is less than 3 inches. Granted, 75 millimeters is also less than 3, but it's greater than. So anyway, I fly over here into the woods to oversee the table a bit better and to protect my Horror, who needs to move forward to project Threat and Vicious and Banechant into this combat. So I'm just hiding from these guys. The Air Elementals, again, they're such a huge force, and then I'm out of 20 of this. So anyway, I move the Void Lurker here. It looks fine to me. Then I do the 1-inch disengage or 1-inch withdraw, and then 3 inches to the side here, which allows the Reapers to charge. So the Reapers charge, my Shade joins them, because the only thing the Shade could charge is the Beast or into these Force Shamblers. The Force Shamblers I have a different plan for, which is Lightning Bolt. I plan to just shoot a lot of lightning at them. They are only at 5 wounds now due to Radiance and Heal, but still, it's 6 Lightning Bolt that's on 4s and 4s, and then 6 Lightning Bolt on 5s and 4s. So I'm looking for about 2 wounds, and I still have Dread on them. So, again, they'll be at 7, but that's 6 twice to kill. Looks easy enough. So anyway, and I have to do it, right? So no use arguing about it. So I'm going to be going for that. If I get lucky with this Lightning Bolt as well, I can just Wind Blast this tree to get them out of Inspire range. since it's a bit tight, and the tree will travel like this, right? So it's an even better vector. So anyway, that's the plan. And over here, yeah, I take this double charge with my Reapers. This is not hindered. The flank charge obviously is hindered. But I look at this again, and I was talking to my opponent during my turn about it. And in the end, we just, I didn't want to argue, and I didn't want to argue about something for another 10 to 15 minutes about when I was 50-50 about whether I wanted to do it in the first place. And what I wanted to do was charge with these Reapers into the greater Earth Elemental, and then these Reapers into the front of the Earth Elementals here, and these Reapers into the flank. And the argument was, will these Reapers end up hindered, right? Because I have to take the quickest route. But the quickest route is also the one with the fewest wheels. So I don't think I actually have to wheel to hit this unit in any way that travels through this forest. And we don't even check it, because in the end I'm like, screw it, I just won't do it. So instead I just charge in the front here, charge in the flank here, and decide to set up against these water elementals. And I'm like, this is another play that I find absolutely fine. It's perfectly acceptable. It's impossible that these guys can nimble charge me in the flank. So I'm super cool with it. This is fine. We'll see how that comes back to bite me. A bit of foreshadowing. But anyway, that's that, and let's get into the shooting. So, I guess we'll get into combat. So let's actually talk about the shooting real quick, which is I fire the lightning bolts here. This, on 4s and 4s, I miss with all that. So instead, I have to fire the 5s and 4s. And I roll pretty well. I get 2 wounds from that. So I'm like, yeah, that's fine. Blue leader, again, best leader. But I can't roll a 6. For some reason, I can't figure out how to roll it. So instead, I roll a 5, and they're fine. So we get into combat. And yeah, here's an interesting bit with these Reapers. So originally I wanted to, obviously I'd prefer to reform them, or even reform like this and face towards the table. But again, these air elementals, because they can surge into my flank, will just kill them if I do that. So my opponent and I spend a lot of time again on something, which is figuring out if I can dodge the air elementals, right? Their nimble flank charge. So I figure out that if I back up 2 inches, right? So, or over 1, which is 2 in a backup move, I can dodge that charge, but that means rolling a 3+. And after a lot of gnashing of teeth, I decide that it's worth pushing for that. It does open up an auto flank on these guys, but I can fix that with my shade. So I roll it. I get over a 3, or over a 3. I think I actually rolled a 6, but I run into my Mind Screech, so I just go the 2 and some change to dodge that flank charge. So that feels good. And then I decide to just shimmy. So I crab move with my shade a little bit. The shade's actually facing like this. I just put it down wrong. But anyway, I shimmy a little bit to my right and her left. The plan being, or I guess her right in this case, because she's backwards. But anyway, I do that because this space is too small for the Force Chambliers to fit through, and if they want to charge into the shade using the individual rules, it's not really going to help them, right? They're 9 attacks on 4s and 4s against a shade, and I'm 11-13 inspired, so I think I'll be fine. So that's the plan there. And also, I think that because they will slide down, their leader point will probably end up in my front, and if they get the overrun, they'll hit into the front. So that's perfectly fine. That's the plan. And here we go with the rest of the combats, which is, yeah, these Reapers blow right through those Earth Elementals. And I'm thinking, even if I was hindered, right? So that's going to be 75 attacks on 4s and 5s with vicious-ish, right? Like, I could have pushed forward to give them both vicious. And I can get, Bane Chant on the 50, which I did. So I'm like, even if I was going to end up hindered, I definitely should have just taken that charge there and then taken this charge here. I think that would have ended up a lot better. And I have the chance to just one-shot this Earth Elemental. I've done it before. Earth Elementals, or Greater Earth Elementals and Earth Elementals, are a little ridiculous. I think that they might need another balance patch, which is, they gave them Brutal, which is great, but they're Def 6 unit that's dash 18 and then dash 19 for the Greater. And I'm like, why? I think that maybe a bit of underestimating how important high def and then high nerve fearless units, or how powerful those things are. So I think that maybe dropping them down to 17, 18 again and leaving them with Brutal would be fine. But anyway, I could walk through that. I do have 25 attacks. Reapers are insane. So I could kill them. It's definitely within the realm of possibilities. But anyway, I go for this instead, and I have to face as you can see. So first off, I've got these Reapers turned in a specific way along with these Reapers, making sure that this space is less than 50 millimeters, right? So the Pegasus or the Unicorn cannot fly and get a flank charge right there. And then I also have to make it so these fire elementals are in my front. Now, I could dodge their line of sight entirely, but again, my opponent has a lot of surge and not a lot to do with that surge right now except for cast it, right? So like, for example, on this tree herder, it doesn't have any targets except, to cast surge. So if I decide to hide, I actually make it so these fire elementals can just 1-inch surge my flank, so I'm dead. So instead, I place them, as you can see, they are running into, it doesn't look like it, but they are running into my corner if they go directly forward, and if they pivot and try to move that way, because if you are within 1 inch of an enemy unit at the beginning of your movement, you just have to end farther away from them at the end of your movement. But there's no way they can do that and stay out of 1 inch of my butchers down here. So it's impossible to get that flank. They'll have to take the front charge, which is not great, but it's better than a flank. And over here, I'll talk about a bit of a problem during my opponent's turn, but it was sort of a Sophie's choice. So the air elementals over here could charge into my flank if I turned in a different way. So over here, if I stayed parallel, right, to the greater earth elemental and made it impossible to get a surge flank charge because it's not nimble, I can't protect myself from the air elementals who can just charge into my flank. And I decide that this one only hits on a 4+, they hit on a 3+, so I'll just take the greater, I guess. And we'll talk about a mistake about that in a second. So anyway, let's move forward into the end of turn shot and turn 4. So turn 4 for the Force of Nature, it's quite brutal. Mostly again due to I've made a lot of mistakes, but on the right side, on the left side, it's just that these stupid shamblers won't die. So speaking of the shamblers, they charge into my butchers, they charge second, so the fire elementals charge first into these reapers, and then they follow suit. So anyway, so we've got a charge there, and then a slight pivot over here with the earth elemental, and this is the problem. This is illegal. And it's because, again, you can move with your unit, but only if you end farther away, which they didn't, right? You cannot pivot in this way because it can't move to the side and pivot. It's not nimble. So it had to move to the side to get its leader point in my flank, and then it also pivoted. So it hit my corner, right? Or even then, it can't move to the side is what I'm saying, because it stays equidistant, right? Because my corner was actually parallel to it. So anyway, this is illegal, but I didn't notice it at the time, for sure, and in fact moved my unit in a way, assuming that it would happen. So anyway, let it happen. And over here, this is what I'm talking about with the unit down here not being the best, which is I didn't even notice that the Pegasus could charge me. I could have sworn that I measured it, but I obviously didn't, because my opponent's like, I'm within 20, and just moves it. And I'm like, well, screw me, right? So anyway, we've got water elementals in the front, Pegasus in the side. That's probably dead Reapers over there. So not the best. And again, because these guys are alive, I don't even have a charge with these because I had to hide from the air elementals. So anyway, let's go into the shooting and combat. So with shooting, they get the flank charge here. Again, it was illegal, but I didn't notice. And over here, we've got the charges. I don't even know what this shooting shot is showing. Maybe it's just showing off the fact that I'm dumb. And here is the end of turn shot. So first off, let's start on the right? Because it's funny. The Pegasus charges into me and does 3 wounds, which is about average. And then the water elementals are like, 1 wound to the front, please. So again, with their first 18 attacks, they only do 1 damage. They don't even waver these guys. So I'm like, cool, that's cool for me. The Greater Earth Elemental here, 24 attacks on 4s and 2s with Brutal. It just walks right through those guys very easily. I think it rolls above average, but it doesn't really need to. So it kills them off. The Fire Elementals do the same thing. They actually are 9 or 18 attacks on 4s and 2s with Vicious, right? So they are like 9-ish wounds, right? But they do 12 wounds to me, and I already had 2 on me, so pop. But they did not need to roll insane. If they rolled even below average, right, I'm at least wavered, probably dead. So even below or even average puts me on double ones to die, I believe, right? Because that gets me to 11. No, it's not double ones to die. It's a 5 to die. But anyway, it's not great. It's not double ones to waver. So they kill them off pretty easily. And here is just the piece de resistance, which is the Shamblers walk into me, they do 2 damage, and they need a 9 to kill me twice. But why roll a 9 when you can roll double 11s? So my opponent just walks right through me, and I'm like, these 4 Shamblers are the worst. They are my actual nemesis. That is just confirmed now, right? So these are my nemesis. So anyway, things are really, really bad, and I'm like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. But let's see what the Nightstalkers can do with their turn 4. So here we go with Nightstalker turn 4. I need everything I do this turn to work. Everything I shoot at needs to die, right? So first off, I turn with these Reapers towards the fight again. I take the Mind Screeches. I need to kill off the Shamblers who, so the Druid hit big with its heals. Of course, it got them down to 2 damage again, so they'll... What a nightmare. So I'm shooting into them. I send the Shade, and my Void Lurker finally engages. So we're double charging into the Fire Elementals. It's not the best charge, but it's what I've got. So I've got 10 attacks on 3s and 2s, 5 attacks on 3s and 4s, and then I also still have Dread. So hopefully I can get something out of that. And lastly, I send these Reapers into the Water Elementals. Yeah, I have to kill them off and then turn to face the Pegasus. I don't really have anything else I can do against it. Or not a Pegasus, it's a Unicorn. I don't have anything else I can do against it. And then I move this Horror to be out of line of sight of the Unicorn. It's not engaged, so it can't turn, right? It can't, there's no way it can fight me unless it wants the Lightning Bolt. So anyway, that's what I do. And here's my only shot of this turn, which is I get them up to 7 damage again, and it's a 6, so like this is the 3rd shot at those 6s, right? I'm gonna get it this time. So I roll it up, I get that 10, and on the second roll, I roll a 5, and I'm like, wow. Just wow. So they're perfectly fine. I don't have a picture after that, but I do manage to kill off these Water Elementals because Reapers are insane. So they just one-shot them, easy peasy. I did fail the Bane Chant, so I got a double 1, but it doesn't really matter. I just walk right through them with crazy rolls. And then my Void Lurker and Shade. The Shade does really well. I roll it first. Does like 3 wounds, right? So pretty insane. But then the Void Lurker with 10 dice on 3s just misses all 10. So I'm like, okay, cool. So that's end of game. We pick up there because it's 2 in the morning. But if we were to roll it out, right, so this gets a flank charge, this front charges, kills the Void Lurker, this can charge into my Shade, probably kills the Shade, because that's 6 wounds. That doesn't kill a Shade, but it's a 7 to kill it. I mean, you could just run away with the Inspiring, right? Just stay out of 12. So it's a 7 or a 6 twice, right? That's not pretty. But anyway, so these are probably dead. This is probably dead. These Reapers and the Mind Screeches are fine, right? But this Greater Earth Elemental is going to get that 4th loot token. So no matter what, they are winning. They don't need to get them across to my side. They're already winning. And this has 0 damage on it. It's inspired. It's going to be fine. And then the Unicorn here can either charge into the Reapers because I have 4 damage on me, or more likely just move out and try to do some tricksy maneuvers because these Reapers, if they turn to face, are already within range of this Tree Herder. So the Tree Herder probably charges into me and tries to kill me. Maybe it double charges, who knows? But the point being that I probably lose these Reapers. I probably lose the Void Lurker. I probably lose the Shade, or at least get wavered on the Shade. The Shade will not be useful next turn. In any way, so I lose all this, and then I have 3 units. I have a Horror, I guess, but they're not in position to really do anything because, again, this unit is alive. So even if they fail to kill the Void Lurker, I still can't do anything because I still have to kill it, right? So it's just the end of the game. There's no way to fight through it. So we take the forfeit there. Not a big forfeit, right? It was more of a let's go home and play. I will say this was a fun list to play. It's not exactly the most competitive version. I think that, you're just spamming out Reapers for the fun of it. But it was fun to play. And more importantly, I really like my opponent's army. I thought it was a blast to play against. It looks like a blast to play as. So really happy to see an army like that. And anyway, I hope you guys liked it. And until next time, bye.